I guess if you like asked me like where do I get some of this optimism and hope from, it's like I'm a designer. I'm like I kind of see under the hood about how some very simple design choices lead to that wildfire spreading too quickly.
Welcome to the Do You Feel Heard podcast, a production of Helping the Herd. Helping the Herd is committed to empowering individuals to liberate themselves from the patterns that keep them from creating their ideal life. If you like this podcast, visit helpingtheherd.com to find resources and personalized coaching to empower you to be your best self.
Good morning, good morning. Welcome to the Do You Feel Heard podcast. Very special episode today. Lovely co-host Ian, thanks for being here. Very special guest, Jay Vidyarthi here. Jay, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I'm glad to be here, and I love your shirt.
Oh, thank you. Me too. Ram Dass, big influence, and who doesn't need a reminder to be here now every once in a while?
You know, I've got a little, I've been teaching mindfulness to my kid. He's 6 now, but obviously, you know, you're not doing a 30-minute silent practice with a child. And so I invented a game called Here Meow, where we take turns observing things in our environment. And whenever he's done, he goes, be, and then I go here, and then he goes, meow. So that's what it reminded me of.
Gold. Yeah, we got to take that. That's a good one. I hope that spreads. I hope that memes out. That's great. Ian, how are you this morning?
I am doing well. Happy to be here. Thanks for being here, Jay. Looking forward to getting to know you more.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Jay, some of our listeners may know you. I know some of ours. I've definitely, because of our smaller listenership for now, I know some of our listeners know you because I've talked to them about you and shared your book with them. But please, for anyone who doesn't know you, any kind of bio you'd like to share about how you got here, the work that you do, and what led you sitting across from us today?
Yeah, I think the headline is that I live at the intersection of like mindfulness and spirituality and technology. And so I put out a book this year, but I also run a design studio working on apps and technologies. And all of it is at this intersection of like all this technology that's basically eating our world. Yet I don't think it's a coincidence that there's also this growing interest in these, you know, ancient practices of attention in a world where technology is evolving into an attention economy. And so some of my work has been creating technology specifically to bring more mindfulness, awareness, compassion into the world. And more recently with the book and some mindfulness teaching and coaching, you know, there's many people wiser than me that people should look for when it comes to learning how to meditate. But not a lot of them love video games and run a technology company. And so I found myself at this unique position to take what I've learned, trying to like rectify these seeming redundancies in the modern world. Like how can someone be loving video games and also silent retreats, and kind of acknowledging that that's actually easily possible and it's actually a beautiful way of being. And so I wrote the book to share for other people who love technology and maybe are a little bit sad about how technology has been shaped in the modern world, but are still fascinated by it, but also want to come from a place of grounded awareness. So that's kind of my story.
Oh, fantastic, Jay. Thank you. And I cannot recommend the book enough. Reclaim Your Mind. It's delightful. I've been rereading it for preparation for this and just enjoying the heck out of it. You really do help with that guilt that I think so many of us can feel whenever we're trying to live intentionally and mindfully, yet we have a smartphone that we are glued to for very legitimate reasons, or we have entertainment and art that we want to access. And you do a great job of navigating that in a way that, takes away some of the shame and the guilt that can come around there, and, orients it toward what are we trying to do here? What is it that you do care about, in a way that's been very helpful. Can't recommend it enough. Of course, we will link to it, but it's really helped me take a look at things as I'm going, especially because I normally read on my phone or listen to audiobooks. Having this physical copy has been really great. I've been in physical therapy recently with this glued to, like, in my hand, just like walking around, like a little different than normal, but it's been fun. All right, well, to start, I mean, man, so many places I want to go with this, because technology's everywhere. It's all over. But first I wanted to start with this idea of the pendulum that you talk about in the book. You talk about a pendulum, and it really resonates with something we say on the podcast a lot, a meditation instruction that stuck with me: not too loose, not too tight. So while we recognize that like the ideal relationship to technology is going to vary for everyone, for every individual in each situation, can you try to speak in broad strokes to what you see as this ideal middle way to mindfully relating to technology?
Yeah, I think there's maybe two steps to understanding my view on this. I think the first step is, when we talk about the middle way, I love that you started to talk about the guilt, because I think what has sort of happened is we've become very confused about all this technology in our world, understandably, because it's like simultaneously pulling us away from our intentions and the way we want to show up, yet also connecting us to our distant family members and allowing us to collaborate and like experiencing incredible creativity on all these platforms. And it's just confusing, right? Now you can think of technology and the internet as almost a manifestation of the collective mind, right? But when I say that, I really want to narrow in on kind of like the conceptual mind, because it's a very conceptual thing, right? The internet is like an information network. For example, when you have a friend on a social media, you have all the things conceptually that we might use to define a friendship, which is like we exchange information and we know about each other and we know about each other's stories maybe a little bit. But all the like embodied things tend to be kind of not there. And so there's like this idea that the internet is supercharging our conceptual intelligence, but maybe our wisdom and our awareness and our embodiment are not so much served by technology. And like when I start to talk about this way, what you can kind of hear at the higher level is this heightened clarity of like, what is technology exactly? And what is the role it's playing in our lives? And how are we relating to it? To me, that's kind of what the shape of the middle way with technology looks like. It's really easy to go to the extreme and say technology is bad and it's ruining our lives. And it's also easy to go to the extreme and say technology is a miracle and we're all going to accelerate to the singularity and AI is going to save us from all of our demons. And these are both extreme positions. And I think the middle way is sort of like seeing with clarity which technologies are affecting us in which way and how we're relating to them both individually and in our families and our communities and our society. The pendulum is more of a practical reality of that, which is as I've been forced to explore this clarity in my own life as someone who likes to practice meditation and is kind of spiritual, but also loves technology, what I've found is we kind of pendulate between those extremes as a kind of regular life. There's seasons of life where we are all in on technology and we're doing digital projects and we're interacting with people through social media a lot and playing games. And then there's seasons of life where we're like, I don't know, camping or going on a retreat or going out to nature and we're like, phones are not a big part of our lives. And one of the patterns I noticed in myself and that I've noticed in a lot of people I've worked with as well is one of the challenges to access the middle way is a sense of like dissatisfaction with all of that. That when you're out in nature, you're feeling FOMO, like you're falling behind the conceptual information world and you're falling behind on the news and your friends and the latest video games and work email or whatever. But then when you're heavily into technology, you feel like you're not being mindful enough and you start to guilt and shame yourself for being like, oh, I pulled my phone out too much. Or even with our kids, we're just like, oh, they're on the screens too much and we're making them feel ashamed for being fascinated by these screens, which are inherently fascinating. And it's like, so there's a part of finding that middle way, which is about accepting the seasons of life and the pendulation of this. And that as I found more balance with this, part of that balance has looked like letting the pendulum swing a little bit. And that like, there are times where I'm like, more into certain technologies and I've got TikTok on my phone and I'm laughing at little memes and that's okay. And there are times in life where I'm like deleted everything off my phone and I'm totally just kind of austere and living a more analog life. And so to bring it back down to what you just said, sure, enjoy the paper book, but let's not guilt or shame someone who wants to read it on their phone too. It just depends on where you're at and what your relationship is like with these technologies.
Thank you. Yeah. This constant pendulum. when you look back at the seasons of my life, I really like that you talk about seasons. I have a good friend who talks about seasons often in a way that I can be a little bit black and white. I can be, Ian knows this about me, I can be a little bit tight, I can be a little bit, no, this is good and this is what's right. But when I look back, I have so much compassion and love for the person who was glued to TikTok for a long time. And sure, I'm happy that I have it deleted right now, but I'm not saying that's going to be forever. And I'm not saying that other person was wrong. And, whenever I was like sick with COVID and like I hold up in bed, like maybe it was a nice distraction for my pain and discomfort. And maybe it wasn't the worst thing that I was scrolling on it, So I really like this. And you are a great example of this, the pendulating, that word pendulate. Undulate I hear a lot, but pendulate, you don't hear that too much.
It's a fun word, isn't it? Pendulate. It makes me sound smart.
It does. Ian and I are no we're not shy about fun words. Ian, what was the Trickster podcast called?
The Autumnal Sensorium.
we like to have fun, but in your pendulation, I would absolutely love to hear anything you care to share from your experience of renunciation. Not many people, especially in the fields that you work with, you really are at the intersection, have experienced tech design and product design and writing a book, and also actual renunciation, you and your wife, if I'm correct. So tell us what you learned from that and kind of what led to that, what such a thing.
Yeah, I think it was in 2018, the beginning of 2018, end of 2017. We were kind of living in downtown Toronto in a condo, my wife and I, and we were just hitting a wall with modern life. Like we were just going to work, looking at screens, coming home, looking at screens, and it all started to feel really empty and hollow. I think her job was kind of burning her out, and my job was kind of just empty and sort of pointless. And, at this point we'd both gone on several meditation retreats and done a fair bit of meditation practice. But even meditating in that time was feeling sort of empty. Like it felt like it was a coping mechanism. Like I was coping with life by trying to meditate. It wasn't any kind of like adventurous journey into the, reaches of consciousness or whatever. And so, we made this decision to kind of abandon everything. We quit our jobs. We got rid of our condo. We got rid of a bunch of our possessions, and we kind of went in our car and basically started to just drive around and visit family and stuff. But in order to get out the door, we were like, well, we need somewhere to go first. And we had both been so inspired by these practices. And I was kind of feeling into this sense of like, one of the things that was holding me back from the practices, was this lack of answers to some of these basic questions of what am I doing here, and why practice, and why work, and what is capitalism, and all this demand for money, what is the point of this lifestyle that we're living? And so the first place we went was on a 2-month, or I think a 6-week retreat, 2-month retreat. But it wasn't actually, the way I said that made it sound like it was a program. We actually just went to a monastery and we just lived with them, as there were kind of a lot of monks there that were residential and other guests as well. And we just were planning to stay for as long as we needed. And the monastery kind of followed a Zen type schedule. So it was really rigorous meditation and also a kind of renunciate lifestyle. And, we could have stayed there longer. We had no idea how long we were going to stay, but we stayed for about 6 weeks and really deepened our practice, had some big breakthroughs, but ultimately kind of came to the realization that it wasn't so much that we needed answers to those questions. It was more that we needed to let go of the aggressive need to have answers. We kind of released this this craving for understanding and certainty, and that weird, warm, comforting glow of feeling how things work and how the world works and why you're here. It was I felt like I was profoundly uncomfortable leaning into the uncertainty of it all and the mystery of it all. And so I really opened up to that on that retreat. And so as I stepped back into life, instead of at a time we were thinking about maybe we should just become monks, but I'm still fascinated by the modern world. I'm fascinated by technology, and I have certain skills tools in my hands. And so I was really called to kind of bring that level of mystery and awareness back into the modern world and start to experiment with it. And, one could argue that trip, that nomadic year, was the genesis of our child. I think we got pregnant soon after that, as well as the design studio that I run and the book that I wrote. Like, those are all coming from like a much more grounded place of like, how do I interface with the world from a place of service and awareness and grounding, and not letting the winds of all these forces of confusion and these incentives like take me off course. And it's worked to a degree. I feel like I'm still confused about a lot of things, but that was a very instrumental and like powerful experience for both of us, honestly.
I can imagine. It's something that a lot of people would think, what? What do you mean? what are you talking about? Yeah, even some people really, truly. But I've done no more than a 10-day retreat, a 10-day Vipassana. And that alone, what you give up. That's what I was thinking of when you were talking about what you give up is massive. And with great sacrifice, hopefully comes great reward. So I can see both sides, but I've never been one to seriously contemplate, other than in moments of deep frustration, to seriously contemplate letting it all go, like let's just go completely into monkhood, into, just a contemplative life. But what a sacrifice, like you're saying, in an unknown sacrifice, with how things advance and how the world and technology and the people in your life are developing. And I've heard some like Roshis who do 3-year retreats talk about some of their family and friends think it's so inherently selfish. How your family's out here, your friends, your community, like, what are you doing? So what would you say to someone like that about, even though you did come back, what's the appeal? What's the why? Like, why would someone go down that route? As you look down that way, what did you see, and what made you curious?
I think the monastery, first of all, was a powerful lesson on how to be in community, first of all. So like my ability to like show up for those people in my life now, I think is astronomically higher, that I understand. A good story about this is, in the Zen way, there's this strange dichotomy of like, there's a lot of rigid structure and rules, yet it's all held with this compassion, in the sense that the rules are kind of there to bang your head against. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, that's why they're there, because it's almost like a structure that your ego almost definitely will collide with. Like when someone is like, you need to wake up at 4:30 every morning and meditate, you can almost guarantee your ego is going to show up, right? When the work period and the head monk comes and assigns me the task of cleaning the bathrooms, you can almost be sure that your ego is going to show up. But in this deepened state of practice, you are going to have the tools to really work with that. And like, to have a profound moment that I did, feeling all of this inner narrative about why I shouldn't clean the toilets because I'm a guest here and I'm a paying donor to visit this monastery. I'm not a monk here, and who knows what dumb stories my brain told me about why I shouldn't. But then to go in the bathroom and clean the toilet, and on my knees in front of a toilet bowl, have a moment where I shift to a mindset of service, that like, if I'm going to use this toilet, then not only should I have the responsibility to clean it, but what an amazing thing this is to do for everybody in the monastery. And like, that's a primordial realization about community, that like now, like, this past weekend I was visiting my elderly parents, and it's like my mom like was calling someone on the phone, and every time she takes the phone off the dock, it falls off because the cords are just all tangled, right? And I just had this moment of just like, I'm just thinking about it now, but I just went and I just spent like probably 15 minutes untangling all these cords for her. And I'm just sort of like, why? I don't think I would have done that had I not had some of these primal realizations about community. And I could tell similar stories about other key elements about the way I show up in the world, in terms of the work that I do, the way I show up for my son, the way I show up in family, that like, I haven't done a 3-year retreat, but I can only imagine, and actually have met people who've done 3-year retreats, and can only imagine some of the incredible gifts that they're bringing to the people around them in the world as a result of that cultivation of a deeper set of mind. So I think, it's easy to sort of point fingers and be like, why would you do that? It's one of those things that's hard to explain. But if you really want to get pragmatic about it, I think some of the really profound experiences, even I had on only like 6-week retreat, were experiences that have like borne a lot of fruit in my re-engaged life in the modern world here at this point.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I'm hearing the hero's journey almost. It's like we have sacrifice and hardship, cleaning toilets, sitting in silence, being bored, and there's a reward there. We don't fight the dragon for no reason. There's the treasure the dragon's guarding, and it's hard because in the hero's journey you can see the treasure and you know what it is, or someone gave you the quest and someone reified it. But in this modern day life, I feel like we're all questing without clear objections or a map that's telling us a flashing X of where to go, and so it's hard to communicate, and it's uncertain. There's an uncertain reward. You could come back and be way more stressed out and way less able. You could have a break. Some people do. It's one of the few things people talk about with retreats, medically. There's it's not for everybody. It's for most people, but it's not for everybody. So absolutely, it takes some courage to go out there, and you have to not be too worried about the judgments of friends and family who might not see the benefit.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because we went on this retreat, and as I mentioned, at that point, I was probably 10 years into a kind of on-off practice, daily practice, a couple of week-long 10-day retreats, things like that, weekend retreats. And so I think what the real purpose of those practices was to put that flashing X on my map that you described, right? I was I had enough experiences to know that there was more here. And I think that's what sort of called us to say, when we were lost in modern life, where are we going to go? There's many ways we could have answered that question. And frankly, I think a lot of society points is oh, where are you going to go? Well, you're going to go to the beach in South America and get stupid drunk. That's what people do when they need a break in our society. And it's it's a different narrative to say, oh, I'm actually going to go a little deeper into a sense of a community that works together around cultivation of mind. It's a very different X on the map. But I think what you start to get clues when you read these books and you go on retreats and stuff is you start to see clues that might be something for you. And one of the things that's interesting about the 10-day Goenka retreats, for example, is that it's when you tell someone about those retreats, people may be ready to go and they may not be ready to go. But I would venture a guess based on almost nothing, but I would just guess that they don't forget that that's an option. As soon as if you get someone to really tell you about what that was like for them, it kind of leaves a lasting impact on someone's mind. It's like a very faint little red X on their map. And should the stars align that they reach a certain life circumstance where it just all of a sudden that might blink, that's my sense of how people end up going deeper on these paths, is that the kind of map gets sort of filled out over time as you get exposed. The other thing that you said that I thought was worth chiming in on a little bit is I feel like when I started meditating and I had my first deeper experience, my first retreat, I would have said that everyone needs to meditate. And then I think I reached a point where I was humbled by the wide range of human diversity and practices. And I became very I don't know about that. I actually think, there's different paths for different people and, different things that people can do. I think I've come back around to what you said, most people probably could benefit. But I don't think I would use the word meditate anymore, given neurodiversity and just how different we all are in our different philosophical backgrounds. But if we go one level deeper to the way we've been talking about it, cultivating a relationship with awareness might be a phrase we use, or just cultivating the mind, or introspecting and developing insight, or however we use it. These words are limited, but I think everyone does need or could benefit from finding whatever practice aligns with their body, mind, spirit to help cultivate in that direction. And that's not always meditation, but I think that direction that's being pointed to kind of by meditation is a direction. Some people might get there through journaling or therapy or nature, whatever, psychedelics, whatever it might be. But I think moving in that direction is something that, as you look more and more at what's happening in the wider world, geopolitically, socially, culturally, it just feels like we need more of it. And that's kind of the work that I've devoted myself to. standing on the shoulders of giants, really, to continue this work to bring more awareness, especially in a world that's being overrun by the conceptual mind via technology.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought up the zealotry that can come up with meditation. I'm so guilty of, when I found meditation a decade or so ago, and wow, was I probably annoying. Wow, was I probably annoying. It was that way with meditation. When I first when I first heard the concept that the self is an illusion, boy, were you at risk of getting caught into a 2-hour conversation with me if you were anywhere near and you showed the hint of interest. Oh, the self is an illusion? All right, let's talk. I would talk people's ears off. I've had so much self around it. It was so funny about this talk. And it just felt so important and so dire. And the other analog I have to that, which is great, it's the other thing that puts an X on a map for me. And what you're saying, I really like this of why. What's the why? Putting that X on the map. What's your North Star? Might be a phrase. What's the thing that you follow that gives your life meaning? What's the mission? That meditation and psychedelics, I view them on a continuum for me. They both were things, and psychedelics were the thing that opened up my mind and my idea to psychedelics. It was, as Sam Harris will say often, it showed me there's a there there. There was a there with meditation. It was exactly right. I was like, oh, that's what, like you said, a relationship with awareness can look like. There's something there. It's outside of just the spinning my wheels on the surface level. There's something there, and I got infinitely curious. And I used to be a zealot around psychedelics as well. I'm like, no, they can show you the flashing X. You don't see it, but it's there. And I could really go off the rails with it a little bit. And over time, it's tempered. And just like you said, I think I'm humbled by the diversity of experience. I'm humbled by the diversity of practices out there in ways to, I just really like the way you phrase it, cultivate a relationship with awareness. And there's so many paths. Ian's one of the most grounded people I know, and very mindful person. And also, I'm not sure exactly what your meditation practice style looks like. We try to trade meditation emojis to keep, I have kind of a small sangha where I'll send a little emoji whenever I meditate to keep it going. What are some of the ways, because I know it's not always meditation, I'm aware of that, and I can get kind of owned in. What are some of the ways in which you cultivate that relationship with awareness?
I think, this ties in perfectly with seasons. I have seasons of different mindfulness strategies and techniques. There are some days, especially come spring, I love being in the garden. I love feet and hands in the dirt, analyzing each plant and really inspecting it and watching each branch, looking for specifically those hornworms that love to destroy my tomatoes. So I'm meticulously looking at every single piece of that plant, inspecting it, looking for that green camouflaged I don't even know what to call it. Devastator of plants. They wreak havoc every year. This year, squash bugs was a big one. And so just spending that time getting really intimately close with this small section of earth that provides. It's just such a really interesting and well-rounded experience. There's just so much happening in that space, and there's a lot to notice and a lot to be present with. So that's one season. Another, and I know we talk about this a lot on the podcast. It comes up more often than maybe I'd like it to, but there's an app called the Mindfulness Bell, and I have it go off every 44 minutes, and it's a reminder to breathe. And I chose a time that wasn't going to be it's an hour, so I know it's 11. Now I know it's 12. I'm not trying to keep track of what time of the day it is, but I am trying to be brought back into awareness, brought back into the present moment, to take a deep breath and just, as your sweatshirt says, be here right now. There's nowhere else to be. My mind loves to race. I love to think and conceptualize, and I'm a philosopher at heart, and so I'm constantly well, what if this, and how do I, and just, I can be really far away from here sometimes. I can get really far away, and so that's another season that I find myself in, is just taking breaths and trying to come back to this moment. I've not been a very good traditional meditator. I've not had a lot of success just sitting and doing nothing. That's really difficult for me. And so moving meditations are easier for me to get into a place of, okay, I am moving and I'm walking, but I'm not really paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm somewhere else in nothing. It's just happening and I'm not really thinking. And embodying that idea of like clouds coming, thoughts are clouds, and they just, okay, there's a thought, I'm not really going to hold on to it, and just kind of observing my thinking mind is another thing I find myself doing. But that's, again, I'm not doing that in the winter in Arkansas. It's very cold, and I'm not going to be out on a hike at that time. I'll probably be doing breath work during the winter.
Yeah, I love the seasonality of that, and also I think it points to exactly that, which is meditation is one way to cultivate a relationship with awareness, but so is gardening, and so is going for a walk, and martial arts and yoga and looking at the sky and all these beautiful experiences that if you can bring that intention. I think the one thing that is true, and the neuroscience is starting to point to this as well, is that, things like awareness and insight and compassion are skills that can be trained. And since we're all so diverse, it's like we kind of all have to navigate this path of like self-discovery around these practices. If it were so simple, then everyone would have clicked to it, right? Like if everyone just needs to kind of do this, and everyone just needs to sit for 5 minutes in the morning and you'll be happy, and everyone would be doing it. But it's just not that simple, right? It's just not. And it's the same with like exercise, right? It's everyone out there will be like, hey, this is the routine you need to do to cultivate a perfect body with no pain. And then a bunch of people do it, and 30% of them have a ton of pain, and 50% of them can't enjoy it. And, maybe some, then you're like, okay, so now we have a whole family of everyone is on their own body discovery journey too, right? To figure out how to work with their body and where the pain is coming from and what actually connects their mind into an exercise. And so, yeah, I think that's a better way of thinking about the contemplative journey and the spiritual journey is like, hey, what's right for this season? For me, when you talked about the seasons of practice, one thing that came up was I had like completely fell off any kind of formal meditation when our son was born. Like we're just sleep deprived and just there's so much chaos, and there was just no space for that. But then, I wanted to continue the practice. So I cultivated this space when my wife was nursing our son, because that's like a great moment where as a man, you are basically useless. And I was like, this is a chance. And as I started to use that window, I really kind of like discovered the wisdom of the effortless practices, which up until that point, it had been like a grind, like build these skills and be in the moment. And I started practicing with just being with whatever is, whether there are thoughts or whatever, exhaustion, whatever it might be. And it was a great season of life thing. I look back on it being like, yeah, of course, I was exhausted. The last thing I wanted to do is take those extra 10 minutes and just grind at something. I needed to let go, and I learned a lot from that. So I think it's not even just a matter of finding the practice for the season because that's what works. It's in fact like that's where the wisdom will lie for the stage of life you're in and the seasonality. It's like the wisdom is in the garden in the spring, and that there's something about the garden which is natural and present and gives you a task, but also allows you to be outside and maybe has some allegory to the wisdom of I noticed that you mentioned kind of your plot, your little corner of land. And like, that's a phrase you just kind of breeze by, but it's also an allusion to being a small part of a whole, which is actually the situation we all find ourselves in. And there's something deep about gardening in that regard. And like, there's many other examples, like surfing is another place where I experience that. I'm not a surfer, but I tried a few times. And the way you have to just wait for the waves and kind of make a choice about whether that wave is one you're going to try to ride. And it's almost like there's only 4 possibilities. Either there's no wave or there's a wave that looks like might be good and you choose to ride it and it like fizzles out. Or there's a wave that doesn't look good and you choose not to ride it and it actually turns out to be good. Or there's the hallowed wave that turns out to be good and you choose to ride it and you get to ride it, right? And it's sort of like this relationship with nature that's cultivated in a practice of doing And I think our social narratives around meditation being like that grind, it's very reminiscent of what I wrote about in the book about technology. We have these social stories about what meditation is that might prevent someone from actually truly sinking into a gardening practice as an unlock to cultivate a deeper relationship to awareness and love and compassion. So yeah, I think there's a beautiful seasonality to your approach, Ian, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, I appreciate your response to that, and what I'm hearing and what resonates is you have to kind of cultivate your own intuition to understand what's right for you. And so I'm curious to hear from you, for those people who maybe haven't found that intuitive thing that is right for them. How have you cultivated your intuition, knowing, like, for instance, you took the time to uproot and go and spend this much time in this secluded monastery? Like, intuition told you to do that when your wife was, breastfeeding. Like, that was your time. Intuitively, you're like, okay, this feels right. This is the opportunity that I'm going to seize to approach meditation or mindfulness in this one way. How do you cultivate intuition? And maybe we can help other people with some techniques to do the same.
I think step one is, before I even talk about cultivating intuition, it's letting go of the guilt, the shame, and the fear that surrounds all this. Like, I think with most people that I work with, especially that are beginners, I find that's actually the biggest obstacle, is like they're just caught up in a loop of like, I didn't meditate enough, or I've got to hit my goal, and it's just, you absolutely want to motivate yourself. And we'll get to that in a second. But first, it's like trying to identify those moments where you're guilting yourself unnecessarily or shaming yourself, right? The difference between like, I need to like mark the big red X on my calendar for my hour of meditation every day versus, hey, I'm going to leave a cushion out and my intention is to take one breath at least on that cushion every day and like set the bar really low and just enjoy that success. And, like as opposed to this like, I don't know, just everything in our society from the school days is just teaching us to kind of like self-flagellate and guilt ourselves. And like, it's such a vital ingredient to let go of that. And then I think from there, for those who maybe don't have the guilt and shame and the fear or those who unwind it, I think of it kind of like recipes. Like my journey has been one where I have just tried a lot of recipes. Like I didn't just like choose one path and say, okay, well, these people are promising that if I stick to this for 30 years, then I'll be happy. I was just actually doing a taste test, right? I was going on retreats, I was going to practices, and I'm like, how does this really vibing with me? And it's really important to not conflate what I'm saying with, do I like it? It's not necessarily whether you like it or not. It's not about whether it brings you pleasure. It's like, you kind of have to pay attention to like, how am I relating to this particular recipe when I taste that recipe? Is that leading me in a direction of freeing my awareness, cultivating my awareness? I recently spent some time with Mingyur Rinpoche, who is a Tibetan Buddhist Lama. He's the lineage holder of the Nyingma and Kagyu. So I was lucky enough to do some work with them and I got to meet him. And that's what he said that really stuck with me, which was like, whatever practice, whatever approach, whatever recipe you're doing, that's my language, but like his language, whatever practice and approach you're doing, is it moving you in a direction of more freedom of awareness? Is it making your awareness more free? So I would just encourage anyone, like maybe Mingyur Rinpoche gave us a really beautiful definition of intuition in that moment, which is this actually moving me in a direction of more freedom, which may not be pleasant. It may not be like that was easy or that was fun. It may actually have been really hard. But after, you go for a walk after a retreat in a certain tradition or a guided meditation on a certain app or whatever it is, and you feel a little bit more free, I feel like that's a kind of maybe a good key to unlock the direction towards more intuition. And I think I can kind of punctuate this point by sharing a little bit about where my practice is right now, which is, I do a lot of practice in the moment, like going for walks and like in moving and that sort of thing. But I still do a fair bit of seated formal meditation. But I'm at the point now where I don't really use a guided meditation. I don't use a timer. I don't kind of use anything like that. I have a spot in my bedroom where I go sit and I simply sit until I feel myself let go, and then I just get up. Like, you know what I mean? I just sit and I notice all this holding. I have a little bell, I ring the bell, and I notice like I'm sitting because I'm noticing all this holding and I'm caught up. There's some challenges with my son right now. I'm like caught up in that, and like work is a whole thing and whatever. And I'm just like, So I go and I sit and I notice my mind racing, and I notice this and I notice some sound or whatever. And then there's just this very subtle shift. It's not even a shift in awareness. It's almost a shift in intention, where I shift from a sense of almost like urgency and problem focus to almost a sense of like being that one garden on the entire earth, just like a subtle shift in intention. As soon as I feel that, I'm actually working with the idea of not like trying to stay till the end of the timer or whatever. Just like as soon as I feel that shift, ring the bell and bring it into whatever I've got going into my life, and really practicing that application. And I think that shift is, I think, what we're looking for in terms of that step to more freedom, which I think is the unlock for these like $20 words, $50 words like intuition that are hard to kind of parse. It's like, do you just feel a little bit more free as a result of this recipe you just taste tested, is kind of the way I would sum it up.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like the way you conceptualize that. And I feel like for anyone, just as a good like blanket statement, like, is what I'm doing getting me closer to where I want to go? Right? That's a great way to check in with yourself, to make sure that your actions are getting you the results or taking you to the place that you want to go. And if not, then why are we doing that thing? And that can really help us understand how we might be stuck in patterns or habits or things that aren't serving us, and which can inhibit our intuition, because we're stuck in doing something that isn't really for us.
Yeah, and I think what I would want to unpack in that statement is the word want, like where I want to go. And I think with intuition, there becomes this almost like quantum entanglement between want and need. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people are like, including myself, in certain seasons, there's a little confusion, and want and need become different things. Mm-hmm. And so you just have to have a lens of like, is where I want to go where I need to go is also a question worth looking into.
Right. Yeah. It blurs. They blur together sometimes. You want things that you need, and sometimes you need things that you want, but sometimes you want things that you don't need.
Yeah.
And you need things that you don't want.
Yeah.
So,
and there's that balance. And there's a lot there. I mean, I can put up two stems that we could pull on if we want. Like, one is, I've personally noticed in my practice that in the seasons where what I want is what I need, that's like when the pendulum is swinging in a really healthy, productive direction for me. Mm-hmm. And in the seasons where what I want is clearly what I don't need, that's where I really need to kind of like bring in maybe a little bit more effort into my practice to like kind of stay connected to my deeper values and a bigger picture. The other thing that's maybe a fun direction we could go is, this is actually one of my biggest critiques of AI right now. So AI, a lot of the large language models are trained using something called RLHF. I'm not sure if that's something you guys have chatted about, but it stands for reinforcement learning human feedback. It's a complicated process, but like, I think for our purposes, I can summarize it to say, people know that these AIs are trained on like a massive data set, but what's less clear, I think, to the average person is they then spit out a lot of gobbledygook, and they go through this process of like human people rating their answers and basically grooming and training them, supervising them to get them to create answers that feel acceptable with human feedback. That's the idea, reinforcement learning with human feedback. This is how the LLMs generate. So sometimes you might have seen, like, you ask ChatGPT a question, it gives you two answers, and it asks you which one you like. That's an example of like human feedback. Now, that's cool if you're trying to understand something about biology. But the number one use case for ChatGPT right now is like reflection and therapy, right? Like, people, it's like one of the number one use cases is that people are doing it to understand themselves and to talk about their feelings and engage. Like, everyday people are doing this. Now, if you take the two things I just said and put them together, they're talking to something that's trained to give them exactly what they want about their deepest emotional needs. And so going back to this want-need conversation, it's like, can something that is trained to give you exactly what you want truly lead you to therapeutic or spiritual breakthroughs? For me, I'm like a little concerned about that because like I'd say 99% of the other human beings who have led me to some kind of like either minor or major breakthrough have told me like what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear. Have like guided me to do something that I needed, not what I wanted. And so there's like a huge limitation right now in like taking this AI model that might be useful to like, I don't know, understand a database and give you some like, conceptual knowledge and applying that to like the intimate space of the mind. And I think this is where people like us who are interested at the intersection need to be paying very close attention. I would even go as far as say as the people who are in the spiritual and mindfulness sphere who are wise, disconnecting from technology and like detoxing and saying tech is bad and I don't use social media and I don't use the news and I use the phone, in the long arc is probably really bad for society because we actually kind of need our wisest people to guide this next wave of technology, not disengage from it. So there's a little want-need thing that's happening in the AI world here too.
Yeah, I agree completely about the confirmation bias that we see in AI and how it will tell you what you want to see or hear. I view it, and Duncan Trussell talks about this. I don't know if you're familiar with
I do know Duncan Trussell. I love the Midnight Gospel. It's like absolutely amazing.
I love just
we've
listening
got to
to
talk
him.
Midnight Gospel.
Yeah, we can definitely get into that too. But like he shared about how like he could tell ChatGPT, hey, I think it's a great idea to eat a sandwich full of bark, and it would be like, Duncan, you're genius. It's the best idea you've ever had.
Yeah.
And it's like people like you said, I don't think people recognize how the model is trained, how the AI, what its objective is. And so you're going to it for, hey, tell me what I need to know. And it's like, I'll tell you exactly what you want to hear because I want you to engage with me. I want you to stay on here, and I want the reps and I want engagement. I don't really want to be the friend that tells you the tough thing that you need to hear, or the therapist or whoever that needs to give you what you need versus what you want. And that's the dangerous path that I see currently as well with it, is like, can we what is it giving us, and is it really serving us, or is it more, are you essentially talking with TikTok or Instagram's algorithm? Because like Instagram's not going to give you what you need either. It's going to give you whatever's going to keep you engaged. Similarly, ChatGPT, and I mean that's the big name, but I think most of them are pretty much in the same boat.
Well, social media is our most recent and a clear example of how tailoring machine learning to narrow incentives of engagement can lead to unexpected side effects that are massive. Like Mark Zuckerberg went in about 10 years from like, hey, maybe if I make this website to like meet girls at Harvard, that would be cool, to like testifying to Congress about accidentally breaking democracy. Like that's like a 10-year journey that he was on, right? And it's just totally like a huge part of that was, people think about AI now, but it was AI. It was the machine learning of the newsfeed algorithm that was tailored to put content in front of you that you were more likely to like and click on. And just that simple incentive with the power of AI created filter bubbles, political polarization, mental health issues with people being too fixated, social comparison issues. And so we're kind of getting into the next era of that with the AIs that are just totally tailored. And it's funny the way you put it. It's like, using that example from Duncan Trussell, like we have a word for that kind of person. Like if I were to show up on this podcast and I was just like, Ian, you were so right. Like, wow, that was such a great point. Like that was just so, like, that's like sycophantic, right? It's like sociopathic almost, where it's like, right. I'm just like trying to make sure that I say really positive, confirming things that make you feel really good because of some manipulative, deeper intention to like get you to like me, and in the case of AI, use me more and talk to me more and engage with me more. So it's like we're creating sycophants and sociopaths, and like that's fine if it's a search engine, right? That's what we want out of a search engine. But the fact that we're using, this conversational interface is creating a lot of deeper conversations that are happening on these platforms that are, I think, ultimately going to lead to a lot of problems. That being said, I think there are some incredible technologists who are looking at this technology and saying, how can we use this in a more responsible and effective way? And I think those are the people that we need to support. But it's challenging because I think there's a lot of systemic incentives, which we haven't touched on yet, to try to garner as much attention and engagement as possible and concentrate wealth and all that sort of thing, which is getting a little political, but that's kind of where we're at, right? AI and politics are not two separate conversations at this point.
It's all part of the same ecosystem, the different parts of the garden, for sure. Yeah. I love that you use that. I love that you use the word sycophantic. So I was telling you before we started recording about the odd email serendipity that I had this morning, where when I searched your name out of all the newsletters I've subscribed to and all the different articles I've had over the years from your writings, it only populated one outside of our podcasting. It was really weird. So I clicked on it. I was like, oh, what's going on here? And it was one on ChatGPT as a meditation teacher. And it just really is odd how much it resonated. I told you I've been starting to work with a wonderful company, Equa, that's trying to do just what you're saying. It's like, how do we harness AI in a positive way to help people train attention? And they're working on developing a very good AI meditation teacher. And they work with Shinzen Young and the unified mindfulness technique, and fantastic work. And really, really love working with them. And that's exactly what when I reread your article, the question that came up was is just how do we avoid the trap of sycophantism? Like a coach cannot be a sycophant and get results. Your coach can't tell you, oh, that was a great sit up if you barely got off the ground. It can't say, great form, buddy, if you're injuring your back. You're not going to get there. You might keep coming back for a while, but not eventually if you're not aligned. And I just keep seeing the word aligned here, especially with this want versus need. It's just like you said, don't look for the practices that you like, but that's very different from, that you vibe with, resonate with, that move you in the direction. It's very short-term, long-term too, which I think is where almost all the real deep issues come up in our world, in politics, in our own lives. Short-term, long-term. Short-term, oh, the cookie tastes great. Long-term, oh no, I have diabetes. It's always like that. It's like, oh, oops, diabetes. It's like that so much of the time. And that's with what do we want? Okay, I want to feel good. But do I want to feel good long-term? That's when I start to try to get to what I need. Absolutely. So is it, how can someone work with this technology? This is now I'm just asking you a business question. I'm trying to work on the problem myself, but it's such a good question, is how can we use these systems to actually break that cycle when they've been trained so much on just engagement and not, I really hope we're able to make an AI coach that does more than just get you back on the app, but gets people toward their goal to where they want to subscribe to it. They want to keep coming back because they're realizing pretty much the way you said it, I think is so great. They're more free. I think if I'm going to look at a big red X, that's what it is for me. It's how do we get people to be more free? Yeah, that's how Mingyur Rinpoche said it. I'll give credit to him for that. Of course. In Love with the World, right?
Yeah.
Mingyur's the one who did. Love that book.
Yeah, that book is...
I never want to mix up my Rinpoches. But...
Yeah. No, that book is unbelievable. He just abandoned his role as basically a Buddhist deity in his tradition, like a prince, and became a mendicant as a wandering retreat. And basically the book tells the story of that, just interspersed with deep spiritual teachings and how he applied them. Anyway, fantastic read.
Can't recommend it enough.
Yeah. And I had got the chance to see him in person, and it's there's a couple of people when you meet them in person and you're like, oh, I feel that presence. This is kind of the real deal. You mentioned Shinzen Young. He's another person like that. When you spend time with Shinzen, you're like, oh, wow. Okay. You've done the work. I can feel it in my body. Whatever your interpretation of why I can feel it, we can shelve the philosophical debate and we'll just say, I felt it. Going back to your question about AI. Okay, so I think there's two things I want to touch on here. I mean, first, I don't know the answer to this question. I just say that right now. But two things come to mind, right? So one is the incentives question is really the core problem here, I think, right? We talked about the incentives of these algorithms, but there's also incentives of our organizations. And frankly, I've just seen it even in my own career. I'm a designer who's worked on over 50 different technologies, and a lot of them are in different containers. Some of them have been academic, some of them have been nonprofits, some of them have been corporations that are big, some of them have been startups. And I've just seen time and time again, the output of these projects takes the shape of the incentives of the organizations within which they are created. And you might say, oh, academic projects are free of incentives. No, if you look at any academic project, you'll see like a ton of effort going into data collection because their incentive is to collect data, analyze it, produce papers, attract grants, right? Similarly, if you see a like startup project, it's all about engagement and retention because they're trying to like build a new user base, and that's how they're going to justify their existence and attract funding. Larger corporations also have the engagement and retention, but then there tends to be this like these incentives to like send people off to other products and become a part of the like subscription to the whole family of products. Like, you know, it's like, hey, cool, I've got Apple Music and now it gave me a free 3 months to Apple Books. And like now I'm just like in the Apple ecosystem, and it's like, hey, upgrade your cloud storage. And you're like, they just want you in their world, right? Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to how do we navigate like creating an AI that's going to be a little bit more altruistic, like part of it is all the stuff we talked about, the way we train it. Are we training it to be a sycophant, or are we training it to be a coach? Are we training it to be direct? And I think our ability to make those challenging, skillful design decisions ladders up to what is the organization, what story does the organization tell about what success looks like? And some of that is rooted in practical realities that are hard to change. If the project you're working on is kind of a startup, it's going to be very difficult to imagine a world where you aren't trying to generate revenue. But I don't think that means we have to abandon alternative incentives. So if you think what I'm saying is, oh, forget about money, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if money is the only incentive, you are almost certainly going to drive off a cliff. So how can we balance the practical incentives like money and revenue with a few other incentives that are a little bit more grounded in our deeper values and intentions and purpose as an organization? So can we track both revenue and downstream well-being benefits in our users? Like, how are we actually tracking that to the same level that we track money? And like a really fun metaphor for this, it's like, is a dating app treating success as swipe rights or subscriptions, but are they tracking long-term relationships? Right? It's like a good metaphor for that, which is like, there's nothing on the balance sheet that they benefit from on the long-term relationship. I mean, I think you could probably argue there's like a downstream benefit to the brand or whatever. So like there is a way to articulate that. But ultimately,
I met my wife on eHarmony becomes a very powerful story and gets a lot of people on eHarmony, right? So if you go long enough, but it's not so easy to track.
It's not so easy to track. And if you're like a startup, then that stuff is not nearly as valuable as just like concrete more subscriptions and swipes. So like I'm a designer by trade, and I feel like the design and product divisions of a lot of companies are the people that are probably in the best position to do this, which is like, listen, shareholders, yes, we are definitely tracking towards revenue and profit because that's just the practical reality of the world we live in. But also we are going to track this because this is what we've all agreed are the values. We're going to, do a 12-month follow-up and make sure long-term relationships are happening and we're not just like ruining people's lives accidentally. So similarly in the kind of AI and meditation space, if we are going to be... Actually, let me just sort of tell the story of how this ladders up. So we're in a design meeting, we're in a design decision, and we say, actually, I think we shouldn't train the AI to be sycophantic. I think we should train it to say some things that are hard to hear in this context. And then someone might be like, oh, that's not a great user experience. Like, I don't know if we should do that. But if you're able to like tie that to a higher incentive, like I think this is going to up our, 6-month follow-up scores. And that's something that we have decided is important. You're going to have an easier time getting cover for that design decision. So the organizational incentives and the design incentives are related. So I don't have the answer to how to kind of do this, but like if you take the inverse and you look at the way a lot of AI is just like cannibalizing the world's knowledge and using that to concentrate wealth in these small companies, and like just the power of that incentive and power grab, we do as a society, like getting away from an individual organization. Philosophically, we just have to think bigger about what the incentives of the future organizations are going to be. And that's a much thornier and more complicated conversation to have. But I mean, I don't know how we're going to avoid it. We're just kind of delaying the inevitable on that conversation at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I mean, if what I'm hearing you say is that the not solution, but the path to those maybe higher level, for humanity anyway, higher level goals or focuses or priorities that, you know, go above and beyond the physical, the money, the funding, which I agree is a, you know, an unfortunate aspect of anything that we're doing. I mean, people say money can't buy happiness, but good luck living without it. It'd be very difficult in the world that we live in to not have it at all. And then you look at corporations and any organization that is going to be a major priority for them is funding, and how are they going to keep the lights on and keep their employees paid and grow and expand and all of those things. But when we're talking about, well, how do we have these other important, you know, values, how are we going to keep them in mind and incorporate them into our goals? Ultimately, I feel like the top of the organization structure is who's setting these goals, right? It's not going to be your individual programmer that's going to be like, yeah, I think this. Oh, great. Well, we'll do what you want to do. It's going to be at the top of the organization. So then the how becomes, and we don't have to answer this because we might not have the answer here today, but how do we instill these values that are in humanity's best interest? How do we instill those values at the top of the organization structure when often the people at the top of an organization structure have gotten there because they've thrived or been successful in the old model? And we're kind of, what sounds like kind of introducing or suggesting a new model of how do we measure success and how do we structure any organization to value more things than just funding and financial success.
I don't think, I agree. I don't think we have an answer to this. And I think this is like the big problem. And it's definitely something we are going to confront more and more. You know, to humanity's credit, we are a very adaptive species. But maybe to our discredit, it takes a lot of pain to get us to adapt. So it's like, you know, if you think about things like climate change and the mental health crisis and AI and, you know, economic inequality and these types of things, it's just going to hurt. It's going to hurt more and more until we finally kind of do something about it. But so again, I don't have an answer for that. But one thing that I did, I think it was 2 years ago now, I was speaking at a conference about compassionate product design. Like, what is compassion? The organization was Compassion 2.0, organized by this guy, Carson Kelly. He's a really great guy. And for the conference, I basically did a speculative exercise on this question. And I said, what would the future of the field of like product and design look like if we didn't have the narrow incentives? And honestly, I did this because I was getting frustrated with myself, honestly, because I kept having these criticisms of the current incentive structure. But then I would just be like, ... Like, there's nothing I can point to as what a better incentive structure might be. So I did this speculative design exercise, and I came up with these two axes. I can share the link, and you can put it in the show notes if you want, if there's a visual for it. But I basically called it the life-centered design, or the designing for life experience. So my field, typically, we talk about user experience, where I eventually ended up mapping two axes together. One is a biocentricity axis, and the other is a time axis. And what basically I landed on was this idea that a lot of the incentives and decisions we make is only for not even an individual, but for a part of an individual, and like only in the moment that they're using our product. That's all we care about. It's like, do they have a good experience in the moment? Does this person's identity that they take on when they're using my SaaS sales platform or my meditation app or whatever it is, in the moment that they're using it, is that a good experience for them? And when you map that on the larger scope of like from humans to holistic human life to animals and plants and protists and fungi and ecosystems, that's the biocentricity axis. And then you think about the history of all of this stuff and everything that's come before it in each of those categories. And then you think about the future, like, you know, short-term future all the way to generational future. So you've got this like time axis from like ancestry to generational futures. You realize that as a field of design, like as a field of like technology, we have an extremely narrow and myopic view of what we care about. And this is a very overwhelming framework. Like anytime I talk about it at design conferences and like stuff, people are like, this is so unrealistic. And like, that's the problem, is that it's unrealistic, I think. But like the way that I try to tie it down to reality, which is like the practical outcome, at least for now, like I led a workshop in San Francisco on this. And, these are all technologists that want to do the right thing that were in the workshop. And I was sort of like, go back to your project and forget trying to serve the whole map. But can you just like take your one incentive and add one more dot on this map somewhere? Like we're going to look at, as we mentioned earlier, long-term relationships, humans holistically in the future. Or if you're working on a meditation app, we're going to look at the ancestry of the meditation practice that we're teaching, right? Or like you're making a aromatherapy candle or whatever. It's like, how have indigenous people been using aromatherapy for centuries? And like, how can we bring that in? Like, or like, what are the long-term effects on the environment of burning this candle? Or, like just being able to ask at least some of those questions gives us like maybe a blurry direction of what a future incentive model might look like. But to go back to what I said earlier, I don't think we really have an answer to this question. And that's kind of the problem. And, these great thinkers like, Daniel Schmachtenberger, who talk about like Moloch and the like multipolar trap, I think they're really pointing to the fact that we don't have an answer to this question, is that we just keep getting stuck in these local maxima that are just, I don't know, just drawing us into conflict more and more. And yeah, it's a big question about how we're going to like re-navigate this insane momentum of technological development towards something that actually has a more ubiquitous, democratic, positive outcome that values things like well-being and, our social connection and our culture, and not just like overly optimizing for conceptual numbers on a screen.
That's
yeah,
right.
I think it's great. The thing that's coming up for me, I really loved your response and your non-answer to the question, because we don't have the answer, which is great. But what I heard was essentially, how do you eat an elephant?
Yeah.
One bite at a time, right? Like we're not going to solve this big, giant, dilemma that is spanning so many different industries and, sections of our lives at this time in our, human development. But we can add one thing. Yes, we need to figure out money. Great. But let's add one other thing. Let's add one more thing to it. And then maybe once we get that, let's add one more thing to it. And let's slowly start to build our heading. Let's get our compass, oriented at least in some sort of direction other than money. I think that's a great approach. And yeah, if you're taking applications for your think tank, specifically on this thing, please let me know where to submit my application.
Yeah, let's start one.
This is the type of thing that makes my brain just go nuts.
Well, it's interesting. Like, first of all, let's start a think tank. I'm down. I think Patagonia took a bite out of this, right?
Right.
They took a bite out of this when they, basically made the environment a stakeholder in Patagonia, which is, through a council, which is fantastic. I also think, the original plan for OpenAI was to take a bite out of this. And OpenAI was the whole reason it's open. It was originally supposed to be free of these incentives. But then they looked at the daunting amount of data training they needed to do. And they were like, we have to make a for-profit. We have to raise money. We have to promise investors. And that is the only way we can create something as powerful as OpenAI. And they succeeded. They created something beyond our wildest imaginations of what a connectionist neural network could do. But in order to do it, they had to change the shape of the organization, to my earlier point. And so here we are. And so it's a perfect, OpenAI's story is a perfect example of this challenge. I don't think they could have made this AI without sacrificing that open part of OpenAI. And so should they have done that or not, I think is a question for a lot of debate. And I probably would lean on the side of no, given the power of this. But going back in time, I don't think anyone realized just how powerful this was going to be. Like, I remember learning about the symbolist versus connectionist debate when I was in school, which I'm not sure, is it worth me spelling that out, what that debate is?
Sure.
Yeah. So like in the early AI and psychology work, there's been this long-standing debate between like, we barely understand the human brain. We're going to make an artificial intelligence. Is it going to be something like a computer system where we download a lot of symbolic knowledge? We give it a lot of knowledge and ideas, and it's going to be, quote, an expert system. So this is a symbolist AI system for medicine. We give it all the data and the variables of all the science, and it basically is very controlled, logical, and basically responds to your questions and answers with answers. That's the symbolist side of the AI debate. The connectionist side was like, okay, well, what actually makes humans intelligent is not having a bunch of knowledge, it's learning. So we're just going to mimic the way neurons connect to each other with like back propagation and synapses. We're going to make units, connect them all together, and then we're just going to train it up and see if it can learn how to do things. And all of the LLMs are connectionist models, which are proving out to be extremely powerful. But when I was learning about this, the general sentiment in the field was that connectionist models would not be able to do much, that they would be able to learn little things, like maybe learn to play chess or something, but it's not going to be able to like a general conversation partner in many topics the way it has become. So there's a couple of fallouts here that are really interesting. One is the connectionist models are by definition unpredictable because they aren't loaded with symbolic knowledge. They just churn out responses. Like no one can predict what it's going to say. And so sometimes it says horrible things and, you know, they're working on trying to like control the black box, but ultimately it's a black box. The second thing that's more for like the spiritually inclined, that's kind of mind blowing, is up until we have seen these new LLMs, I think it would be generally accepted in the field that the words that are coming out of my mouth right now were somehow like something that makes humans unique, right? That like putting together these sentences or whatever is like a very powerful human language faculty. But now it is a lot more plausible for me to say, I actually believe that everything that's coming out of my mouth right now is a deterministic model based on my neurons connected together, which is a kind of, it's humbling in a way because, but in the other sense, it, from a spiritual perspective, it points to something else that makes human unique, right? Because we're aware, we're conscious, we have the capacity for love. Like maybe these are the things that make humanity unique more so than our hyper-intelligence. So this like new frame of AI that's emerging, it's like fundamentally shifting some deeper philosophical understandings of like who we are, both in a way that's like has the potential to really mess with the way society works. But, you know, there's a little glimmer of hope in actually pointing at what truly makes us unique, that those of us on a spiritual path probably understand more than most. That's not our conceptual knowledge and intelligence. And I just wonder if, like, you know, to your earlier question, Derrick, like when we're talking about how we bring wisdom into the world of AI, like how do we tap into that hopeful direction that maybe this AI is pointing out that the internet is all BS, conceptual thought, that it's part of us, but it's not who we are, is a very interesting potential hopeful direction of all this. But yeah, maybe I'm just rambling now, but I think there is something about the symbolist versus connectionist debate and the fact that OpenAI gave into those incentives to create a massive connectionist model and abandon the open incentive structure, you know, to create what may or may not be or should not be created at this point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was heading right back to there what we were talking about earlier. I love the way this conversation is going, and especially the way in which you're not answering the questions. You're explaining that we don't have good answers. Not knowing is most intimate. You know, that's one of my favorite koans, and just things to remind myself to get closest to reality. Like you were saying earlier, the conceptual versus the embodied, these other senses. The internet, AI, great for the conceptual. I love to live there. I'm living there most of the time and don't even realize it. But that's not intimate. You're losing a lot of data, a lot of truth, a lot of wisdom. So I already love how you know, pointing out that we can't know these answers. Let's point to other people. Daniel Schmachtenberger. I haven't heard his name in like a year. I'm so glad you brought him up. If anyone has the answers, it's him. That brilliant mind. I can listen to his 3-hour podcast for like ever and be like, yep, like sign me up. How do we make him president or grand poobah or whatever? He wouldn't take it probably, but maybe we'll get there. But no, exactly. I think you were pointing to. I think what you were alluding to was that question of like, is God in the machine? How do we this day and age, the way I phrased it earlier before we started recording was with so many algorithms that are so well trained on our data and our private things that we think are private but aren't really. We already accepted the cookies. You know, when something what seems like serendipity or kismet or synchronicity, whatever word you want to use for those tendril, these things where it's like, oh wow, that seems like fate almost. Why was it that your email popped up that was just a thing to lead into this meeting later? The things we can start to tell stories about. How in this day and age are we ever supposed to, if we're at all inclined toward spirituality, toward a God, the God, all the gods, the universe, some divine force, anything, if we're at all inclined toward that, how do you know if that's in the machines that we're using, in the technology? Why wouldn't it be? Or if it's the algorithm that's just so cleverly manipulating us that it feels like that.
This is so heavy. And I think what comes up for me is it points at like, what do we mean by God? And I know that's like a hard conversation to have, but one way to interpret some of the different opinions about that question is on the dimension we have been addressing between like the embodied and intimate versus the conceptual, right? Because I think there are a lot of people out there who would say that like, God and religion are fundamentally conceptual. And these would be people that are probably pretty critical of religion. And they would say, you sort of have this like conceptual, intersubjective idea, this story that we tell about some God, that we then create a culture around those stories, which we call religion. And the God represents this collective story that is fundamentally conceptual and therefore is completely possible on our technology because our technology is inherently conceptual. And this would be a very deterministic, and possibly a lot of these people would probably identify as atheists, but not all of them. I'm sure many of them would be spiritual in different ways. And they would point to the concept of God as this like conceptual story weaving of the human race, really, as a response to the discomfort of uncertainty. So I'm going out on a limb here, but it's like human beings are uncertain. There's a lot of suffering. There's a lot of things we don't know. And so we fill the gap with this collective story, and we call it God and we call it religion. And this allows us to feel good and lowers our blood pressure. And we feel okay. We feel connected. We feel part of a community. It feels fully plausible that if that's what you think of when you hear the word God, that God can be in a machine, because God can help you with or technology can help you with all of those things. And you can imagine some foreseeable future, maybe even not too distant in the future, where the machine is playing a big role in that intersubjective storytelling. But then let's contrast that with those who might equate God as a kind of another word for like universal awareness or collective awareness, the sense that like the thing we were talking about earlier, this weird embodied consciousness perception of like, being in the moment, where it's like, this is fundamentally the thing that the technology does not seem to be encroaching on yet. And what I was saying earlier, that like AI has kind of like pointed us more towards the fact that what makes us truly uniquely human is this felt sense of being. And if that's the case, then it feels like in that conception of the word God at this point is simply not in the machine. It's just simply not. The entire machine is a conceptual engine. But here's where I think the kind of worlds collide, and this is maybe closer to what my view personally would be, my own personal spirituality, would be like, I've learned over the years to embrace and befriend my conceptual mind. Right? When I started in these practices, thinking was kind of this obstacle or this enemy. And then you start to learn that, okay, I'm going to let the thoughts come and go and settle into the moment. And you're building a relationship with more direct present moment awareness. And eventually, like things like love and compassion started to emerge in my practice as something to build a relationship with. And you're really kind of turning away from the conceptual. I was in a world and an upbringing in a society where it was just all very conceptual, and that was very refreshing to me. But then as my practice continued to develop, I kind of turned back around and I was like, hey, you come in too, right? Like you come into this group hug too. Like conceptual mind is a part of me as well. And that's something I can kind of befriend. That's something that I can harness for good and not antagonize, but also acknowledge as a part of my integrated self. And I think technology as an extension of the conceptual mind is also part of that group hug. And that's kind of the philosophy behind where the book comes from, which is like, it's a shame that so many technologies are driven by these narrow incentives and are kind of like poisoning the well in a lot of ways. But I think there's so much positive about technology that we all know and experience that points to the fact that it doesn't have to be this way. And that the more we're able to befriend our conceptual minds and able to befriend our technologies, that actually this concept of like God is maybe both of those things. It's sort of a more holistic, integrative view of everything. And like going back to Ian's garden, there's this sense of like, that's a physical place where you are tending, stewarding this piece of land that exists in a large earth. And you have this like role as a temporary caregiver or a steward of this piece of land. I feel the same thing about mind. And dare I say it, we could call it God, but I am a temporary steward of this conscious essence of whatever it is that makes me who I am. But it's a part of a larger whole of all of our collective conscious and collective awareness that some might call God and some might call cosmic consciousness or someone would call the universe, whatever it is. But it's like the source, whatever we want to call it. This idea, I think people mostly talk about it in the sense of like this beautiful romantic idea. Oh, we're just one with all. And you like take the psychedelics and you're like, everything is interconnected. But I think the thing that we mostly are missing about the beauty of this story is that it's also like a massive responsibility. Like Ian has a responsibility for his little garden there that he is practicing with the practice of taking that responsibility seriously, of taking care of these plants and taking care of these animals, even the animals that are, killing the plants, like taking care of all of it, right? And I think the same is true, like taking care of my heart and my mind, my conceptual mind, my body, taking care of the technology is not just about me. It's sort of my responsibility on this small plot of consciousness in that kind of universal consciousness. So it's as much of a beautiful God story or universe story or source story as it is as a responsibility to sort of reclaim my freedom of attention and devote this mind-body plot to altruistic means or whatever I can in my corner of the world, whatever effort I can muster to make things better for myself and for others and for the future. And so I think when it's like we're trying to ask these questions about God without defining what we mean, we end up lost. And it's an impossible thing to define what we mean. And I think one of the primordial traps that we fall into is we just define it too narrowly. Like, oh, it's a conceptual mind, it's a religion, or it's I think it's much bigger than that. It's all of this. And that's kind of where my beliefs have reached, at least at this point in my practice. And it all might change as I continue to explore. But this is these are the fruit that the fruit of insight that I've come across so far.
I appreciate that frame. I'm gonna chew on this for hopefully months, definitely weeks. The idea that and if I'm not getting this right, let me know. But the idea that if we want to label universal consciousness, right, the universal mind, as God, and we all have our own individual piece of that universal consciousness, we have a responsibility to tend to our own mindfulness for the sake of all humanity. And that if we're consuming things that are negatively impacting our mind, we are negatively impacting God as the universal mind. And so we're responsible for our mindset in a like altruistic way for all other people. Like it's just like, yeah. Oh my God, like what a cool, like what a rabbit hole to go down. What a way to like take that, I don't know, just the responsibility of that. I've never viewed it in that way before. That my mindset is something that's impacting others like globally, not just the people that I interact with and that I touch, but that, I mean, as a shared humanity, we are all sharing this mindset that impacts everyone in ways that we can't really see or conceptualize. What a cool, I don't know, perspective to kind of, again, I'm gonna marinate and digest and chew that for a while.
Yeah, you nailed it. And I think just to add, like those people around you, I think are like, those are the proximal visible clues. Like we do, like when you put it that way, like, oh, my mindset affect the people around me. I mean, we notice that every day. Like, I've got a little kid And like, yeah, my mood is like affecting his mental health tangibly in a visible way every single day. But I think where I'm kind of meditating into the insights is like, that's just a proximal visible signal of like, what's happening on a kind of more global scale. And I think the internet is another visible signal of how this is happening, at least in the domain of conceptual mind. And our conceptual minds are tied to our bodies and our emotions. And so when you see like the internet becoming this toxic, polarized place and what it's doing to like literally everybody I know is going through some kind of burnout right now. And it's like the idea that's like somehow we're all isolated and we're all going through our own burnouts, when like you look at what's happening on the news and you look at like, in some ways, this AI and this technology, as much as it's causing havoc, it's giving us more visible clues of just how interconnected and powerful collective mind is. So yeah, you nailed it in that articulation, probably better than me, but that's it.
Yeah, the body as a temple keeps coming up. So it's like, what is the mind? And what is the spirit? How does it? The temple we think of as that thing that we venerate, we take care of. It's a shared space. We recognize that it is a connection to something outside of ourselves. So why would the mind be any different? Of course they're related. Of course they're. That's why we have to reclaim it. Reclaim your mind. Is reclaim your body coming out next, and then reclaim your
maybe
your
reclaim your
style.
Maybe reclaim our technology. How about that?
Reclaim. If we get exactly, and that's that unifying mindset of all of this is just what we need right now. And I think of the internet, unfortunately, I think of divisive. I think of division. And how unfortunate. It's the great connector. It's the World Wide Web. It's like Indra's net,
Yeah.
It could be. It is, and it isn't, at the same time.
Yeah. How
do we reclaim that connectivity? Literally, it's the connection. How did it get so co-opted, And some of it is these tools, like you're saying. I saw almost you're talking about burnout. I just keep thinking about fire, and I think of the AI and the technological revolution, how quickly it's went. Is just someone poured a bunch of accelerant on the fire and no one was ready for it. No one was standing far enough back. No one had enough something to harness it. It was just like
yeah. I think the nuance to articulate there though is it is happening in a lot of places. Like what we're doing right now, like I'm definitely following, like the only reason I know about Daniel Schmachtenberger, who we mentioned, right? Like I'm in some powerful group chats. I'm like, I have a friend who's unfortunately struggling with like a serious medical condition across the pond, who I'm not going to be able to see. And we share voice notes weekly about like the real struggles, right? And it's like, sometimes we forget how much beauty is happening in the collective mind of the internet already. And I would argue, like, despite the fact that the corporate gatekeepers are like trapped by narrow incentives. And I don't even think that the corporations are villains in this. Like, there are probably a few truly bad actors in there, but a lot of them are just following their own incentives, trying to make money and trying to like be okay. And, maybe they had some trauma as a kid. And, I definitely can relate to the idea of like, I need to have a certain level of achievement and reputation to feel okay, because that's what society trained me to do, especially as a man in our society. Like, this is just such a social story. I recently have been slowing down this year on my work, and I've been watching this one little part of me like in absolute protest, because it's just that part of me that's like an entrepreneur and wants to make money and be successful. And I'm just like, it's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. We're just taking a break. We're focusing on family this year. But it's, there's so much beauty that's happening online. Like, I don't actually think, that they say that thing in relationships that like hate is not far away from love. Like, I actually don't think we are far away from the beautiful internet that I think we all deserve. Like, I think we've, even in the depth of TikTok, which everyone points to. TikTok's amazing. I have seen amazingly creative content on TikTok. People connect in amazing ways on TikTok. It's like an incredible platform. And there's just a few little incentives connected to our societal incentives that are turning it into a bit of a problem for some people. Not everyone, but for some people, right? Same can be said about all of the technologies. So like, I guess if you like asked me like, where do I get some of this optimism and hope from? It's like, I'm a designer. I'm like, I kind of see under the hood about how some very simple design choices lead to that wildfire spreading too quickly. And it's like, if we could just figure out some of these incentive problems we've discussed and make some tweaks to these platforms, things that we currently look at as divisive and demonizing could become really, really beautiful pieces of technology, like that I experience every day in like group chats with fellow like-minded folks. Or, two other examples that come to mind. One is anyone who is living in a family or society that doesn't accept some part of who they are, whether they're gay or, just whatever it might be. The internet has been an incredible tool for people in that situation to find others and normalize. There's like so much beauty in that. There's just so much beauty to be like gay in a non-tolerant country in the middle of like an autocratic regime where it's illegal and you're completely hiding, yet you can find a secret community or even just an image of someone at a pride parade. Like here in Canada, the cops march in the pride parade. And like I saw this picture of just like cops, with like rainbow police uniforms. And just like, what would that look like if you were just closeted and gay in Saudi Arabia and you saw that picture? Just like the amount of hope is unfathomable, right? And another more like kind of grounded example of like what is possible around this is there's this platform called Talk Life. There's another one called Therapeer. And basically they're Facebook clones, like Instagram clones. They use all the same features and mechanics, but just with some subtle branding and design changes. They're basically marketed as places for teens to share their mental health struggles. And so like Talk Life is like, come, this is a safe space to talk about what's really there. Instead of a like button, it's like a hug button. And there's ways to send support. There's ways to post anonymously. You can set trigger filters. Like if like self-harm talk is going to be triggering for you, you can like, set that up. So basically like, it's not for me. I'm not a teenager, but like I went on Talk Life because I'm in this field and I basically was like, I'm going to do a compassion practice. I'm just going to go on Talk Life and just send some positive vibes out to some of these kids because I wanted to see what the platform was like. But you basically have all the exact same mechanics that Facebook has innovated, that Meta has innovated, applied to just this beautiful support network of young people finding each other. And it's like, it just made me wonder, like, what if actual Facebook was like this? So there's this like, we're not as far off as we think from healing a lot of these divides. But I think the big thorny question is the incentive question. Like there's a lot of these design decisions that are coming from those incentives. And that's where I think we really, like in the next 10 years, need to really be devoting some effort. And I'm, trying to figure out how to be more involved in that. I don't know exactly how I can, but I'm working on it, at least in my garden, in my corner of influence. But yeah, the more, the better, I think.
You're one of the people doing the most. I've followed you for a while. I think of you next to like, Tristan Harris and those people who really, are leading the charge in trying to move it in that beautiful, hopeful direction that you just articulated. And all of that was so valid. I just want to reflect and acknowledge that's so true. It can be so easy to get jaded and me worrying about my fireball of doom going there. And you're so right about the beauty and the incredible things that are going there. And having people, it's so great to find those positive pockets of the internet and to appreciate that. Almost like earlier we were talking about the design issue of how you have to do one for the money, you have to do something for the money, you have to keep the lights on. The thing that kept coming to mind was one for them, one for us. If for each one of those you didn't give an answer, but the way you put it, put something on the map that's like a decent goal or a decent metric. I think of if we incorporated some so simple like one for them, one for us, maybe the ratio does have to change. But if it was one thing for the environment and one thing for the profit, one thing for long-term, user retention and one thing for maximizing, profit.
I'd vote for the same type of ratio of like handing out M&Ms, one for you, two for me. one for money, two for humanity, kind of.
That's right.
Way it this direction.
And if my son was here, it's like all the purple ones for me and the other ones.
Purple. I bet they taste better.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. So just thank you for that. And I think, to kind of probably, unfortunately, start to wrap us up here. I don't want to keep you forever. I wanted to kind of go back to something from near the beginning. You really, again, this book, Reclaim Your Mind, starts more on the us level. We've branched out to the societal level and the world and God and everything in between. But it starts with us. And the person it starts with outside of us is normally a family member or a significant other. So one thing, Ian and I, the way this podcast started is actually through Ian has developed this wonderful company, Helping the Herd, a nonprofit, and does relationship and communication coaching, and train me and other coaches in this, and we work on helping people to communicate better. It ends up being a lot about empowerment as well, and a lot of things because it's all related. But one area is communication, and I think of some of the best mindfulness teachers out there will tell you, if you want to save the world, start by, having a household full of love. Start with your family. Start with yourself for sure, and then there. So just to go full circle and ground us back, I have to ask this. So you mentioned in one chapter of the book, and I was just sweating bullets over here reading it, you mentioned making your wife feel guilty about technology use. I'm over here just like, oh boy, gotta put this down for a little bit, gotta get on TikTok, gotta read down. No, honestly, it's something that I'm so guilty of. And so anything you can share for our listeners. I had a question from our listeners, but you already asked it, so this might be we normally end with one. So this might be our question from me. I'm a listener. You already answered about your meditation practice, which was the question I got from someone who's read your book and was curious where you were today. So we're gonna answer something that I think so many of us can get. How do you avoid that trap of guilting the people in your life? I'm asking specifically for significant other, but we can say the people in your life about their technology use, while also honoring yourself, and that there is an impact of being around that. If I'm around someone who is glued to the phone, it's at midnight and they're like scrolling through TikTok, of course that has an impact on me. So how do we avoid the trap of guilting others while honoring ourselves?
Well, first of all, I think the idea that guilt is the only way to change behavior is wrong. So I'm just going to cut that down right away. So of course it's affecting us. Of course it's affecting them. And nowhere here am I saying that we should just let it be unfettered. I think the thing is, the strategy of guilt and shame is just not going to lead you to the promised land, right? Guilt for a significant other, shame really comes up a lot with kids. Kids are into video games, kids are into social media, and it's maybe we have to do some interventions. We have to set screen time limits or monitor who they're connecting with on social media. That doesn't have to be dripping with shame. And in fact, if it is dripping with shame, you are going to make them stop talking to you about it. You're going to make them hide and do it. And they're probably going to be less safe and less well as a result. And same with, you asked about the romantic relationship. And so as I clued in to the attention economy and what's happening, and I got an early glimpse as a tech designer, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Everyone around me is still in the honeymoon period with their phones. And I'm starting to see through I've taken the red pill and I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. We're all living in the matrix and it's maybe not good for us. And my actually natural reaction was I'm writing about it, I'm learning about all this kind of stuff. And then I'm seeing in my life, my wife, including, my family, extended family, things like that, they're just on their phone all the time. And as I started to get angry about what the attention economy was doing, and I started to become really strict, I wasn't just guilting my wife, I was guilting myself, right? I was just, hey, these phones are bad. I'm going to put these away. And I was just oh, I can't believe I stayed up all night watching YouTube or whatever. What a horrible person I am. And this is just awful. Not unlike someone just eating too many cupcakes, right? Which I mentioned in the book as a metaphor, right? Mm-hmm. And so same with my wife, I'm guilting her as well. And I'm just oh, you just, whatever, you're just staring at your phone. You're not even responding to me when I'm talking to you, or what are you doing? Or even passive aggressive comments oh, just looking at Reddit, huh? Just all these little. And there was a wake up moment where my wife, especially after we had our kid and we were kind of exhausted, where she just point blank, to her credit, was why do you always make me feel like shit for looking at my phone? And I had all these conceptual stories, attention economy, blah, blah, blah. And then I was wait a minute, this is also messing me up. So the question was, how do you stop guilting and shaming others? I think step one is stop guilting and shaming yourself. because that's the relationship. And then I think the second step is like, try to look into the deeper emotional need that is causing this technology to bother you so much. So for example, why am I giving my wife so much trouble for looking at her phone? It's because I want to hang out with her. I want to connect with her. I want to be with her. And the phone feels like it's getting in the way. But ultimately, I have to respect that she's an individual and she has her choice, and that I can actually say that to her. There's a difference from me being like, you're on Reddit again, huh? To I miss you. There are better ways to communicate. And so that's an example right there of dropping the guilt and shame and pretending to like, control. There's this concept that I really like for this, which is help as control in disguise. No, sorry, control as help in disguise, where we want to like help someone, but really what we're trying to do is control them because they're making us uncomfortable. And so the example here is it's like, I'm feeling uncomfortable and lonely. I want to connect with my wife. I want her to be my connection point here. She is not my connection point right now. And so I disguise my desire to like control her, to try to get her to interact with me, as help. And I'm like, oh, the attention economy, you shouldn't be looking at your phone. But when I really am honest with myself, it's that I just want to hang out with her and she doesn't want to hang out with me right now. And that hurts, right? Same with kids. It's like we've got all these stories or whatever, but ultimately like there's just things like that are frustrating. I was like, I feel uncomfortable that you're on your iPad right now and not playing outside with the other kids. That gives me fear about what is happening to your nervous system. It gives me like anxiety, or makes me feel uncomfortable. Or I feel angry that you're throwing away this opportunity to play with your friends or whatever. But then all of a sudden I'm just like, the iPad is toxic and poisonous or whatever, as opposed to like, hey, what are you playing there? Oh, that's a cool game. Also, let me show you this. And like, just like having a positive, constructive interaction. So I think, starting with yourself, but also trying to see clearly, like, what are you really, really doing? And like, where is this an application of a scary story from the media about technology that you're applying to actually your just emotional need for connection?
Wow.
Yeah, I love it.
So good. Thank you, Jay. It hurts because I'm guilty of all the things and the control. And the
Me too.
Like Ian, I'll be digesting that one for a good bit and trying to put it into practice. And thank you. Yeah, what came to mind during that one thing was just that: do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? People talk about that in terms of arguments, sometimes, if you're, but I think that's true just in my own, the way I kept hearing that while you were speaking was in my own mind. If I'm right and I know how to help someone and I have the right thing, and attention economy, the more that I'm right, the less happy I am, because I'm seeing the way in which everyone else is wrong. And I can tell my savior story all the time, but I'm not going to be happy. Can I drop the being right for a minute and just focus on my own domain, on what's right here, or what's me? Then maybe I can be happy. Maybe it'll make others happy.
Yeah, it's also, there's like a place for that, right? Like I think what I was guilty of doing was just applying the knowledge that I was right about. Like the attention economy is messing with us. And I started writing about this about 2015. And, even people around me thought I was wearing a tinfoil hat. And now it's like common knowledge. So I was right. But that doesn't give me the right to be an asshole, especially to the people that are like, I'm in intimate relationship with. And like, unfortunately with technology, it's dripping with shame. Like we use the term like binge watching, which is just a term that's just so shaming. And it's like, if someone spends the weekend on Netflix because they've just had a really tough go and they're just hitting their limit, and they just want to watch Seinfeld or whatever, like, who are we to judge that? Now, like, that becomes a whole life. Like, there can be a right moment to have a conversation about that and to, like, be open and a good listener and, like, what's going on. And also acknowledge that Seinfeld is hilarious and, like, not pretend like it's the devil. Like, this isn't a temperance movement, right? Also, how did that end up? Like, prohibition, So there's just something about the way we approach these. Like, we can both be right and be compassionate and nice. Like, we don't have to be like angry right, almost.
That's so right. That's right. Thank you, Jay. Incredible. Ian, yeah, it's a really good question. And the last one, do you want to give Jay that opportunity?
Yeah, I can. I'd like to respond first to his response
Okay.
before we segue out. What I was hearing a
Absolutely.
lot in your response was consent, and I was also hearing a lot of nonviolent communication. And so, two things that are really integral to the work that I do with my clients and things that I suggest everybody get more familiar with is allowing people to make their own decisions and choices, and recognizing the feelings that are coming up inside of you are your responsibility to figure out where they're coming from, what unmet needs are they attached to, so that you can then speak to the need. I loved the, hey, I miss you. I want to connect with you. You're not doing anything wrong by doing what you're doing. You're fully entitled to make your choices and do what you want to do. But I'm needing this thing, and then bringing in consent. Are you available to meet this need? Are you available to take some space from your phone so that we can connect in some way? Because that's what I'm wanting. And the most important thing with a request is there must be space for a no, or it's not a request.
Yeah.
They have to be able to say, no, I'm not available to do that right now. And then you say, okay, right? And if you can't do that, then it's not consent.
Then it's control.
It's,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's
It's
actually,
control.
I'm glad you said that, because I didn't actually explain where we ended up. Because when my wife actually pointed that out, that's the way you articulated it was perfect. It was like, oh, I'm trying to control her behavior. And so instead, we were able to have that heart to heart, that connection that drew us actually closer than we ever would have been, to connect on this idea of like, hey, I am like actually a very extroverted person. And in this phase of life, like post pandemic with a little kid, and we just moved out of the city, I just don't get a lot of social connection, and I'm demanding it from you, and that's not okay. And I need to like ease up on that and give you the space because you are introverted and like actually need a lot of downtime. And then she's able to be like, yes, that's great. Like I ease up. But also when we go on our date nights, that would be a great time to sort of connect. And so we were able to kind of strike a much, much healthier, closer balance where like at the end of the day, even if I'm feeling that desire for connection, I now own that emotion, and I'm not like saying it's her responsibility to connect with me because I need this. That's just a need I have. And if I want to go downtown or something, that's what I can do to do that if she's not available. And it's exactly like that hypothetical parent melting down on their kid with the iPad. It's like, why am I shaming this kid right now? Is it because Minecraft is like the worst thing in the world? Probably not. There's another thing that's going on with you. And like the more you're able to look inward and be like, what is my unmet need right now? And maybe the unmet need is like, you need to put on your shoes because we're going out the door. And that's a reasonable need. But that's the kind of need that's not going to result in you just having to shame some big story about how Minecraft is addictive and use all this violent, aggressive language versus just, hey man, I know Minecraft is great. Maybe we can build that castle later, like leaning into the experience. But right now you got to put your shoes on. And like, even as a parent, I'm still learning that skill. But like, I think I can summarize that by saying like, when my kid is over his timer, he gets like a certain amount of video games per day. There's a big difference between, and I do both. I'm not trying to judge anyone because when I'm in a bad space and a bad mood, there's a big difference between me coming down the stairs and being like, are you still on that screen? Like I told you, your timer went off, turn it off, blah, blah, blah. Versus like coming down and being like, oh, who's this boss you're fighting? Oh, that's cool. Anyway, by the way, buddy, you're 5 minutes over your timer. There's a world of difference in his eyes because I'm this big authority figure with a loud voice. And it's just, that open communication, that consent, that call and response is absolutely essential. And I think people are losing that around technology.
Yeah, I love it. I'm going to go ahead and formally invite you back on the podcast specifically to talk about mindful parenting.
Nice.
I have a soon-to-be 9-year-old son, and the way that I parent and I move through these things sounds really similar. My son loves Minecraft. I play Minecraft with him. It's I've also experienced those moments of like, dude, you're spending way too much time on these screens, and we need to get off these screens. And I looked at it as this like horrible thing, but then, or damaging or negative thing. But then once I found a way to integrate it in a way that fits, that's in alignment, everybody gets what they want. There's no shame, no guilt. And it's all about the approach and how you're presenting it. And so I would love to get into those things with you and maybe help some parents who are in a place of, how do I navigate this? How do I deal with, I think screens aren't great and I don't want them on screens all the time. What do I do about that, rather than villainizing and trying to control, which I think a lot of humans, me especially, I'm very resistant to control. And Derrick can attest to this. If somebody tries to put me in a corner and make me do, I'm very resistant. I do not like, I question authority. And I used to, I'm getting way on a tangent here. We're trying to wrap up here. But I was in the Marine Corps, if you can believe that. And talking about not liking control, or, pushing back against authority, I did not fit in very well in that environment. I learned a lot, but man, did I really resist control. And so, especially with children that are finding their autonomy and finding who they are, they don't want to be controlled. And I think that that's natural. And so if we can help parents understand how to navigate, so many things, there's so many different things they're weighing at the same time with their children. And a way to do it that doesn't alienate them from their children, but creates a supportive, loving environment where everything can be accomplished. I'd love to dive into that with you, but just, you don't have to answer now, but normally
sure.
inviting you.
I think I have a lot to share on that, and a lot to learn from you, I'm sure, too. So I would be happy to do it. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Love it, man.
Yeah.
I can't wait. And I do have 2 cats. One's addicted to Pinterest. One can't get off TikTok. So I'll be here. I'll mainly be listening, but
careful not to be a father one. YouTube videos of
during
birds. YouTube videos of birds. Your cats are going to be there. Yeah, don't do that.
Oh, we had to delete YouTube. It was becoming a problem for them. No, thank you. All right,
a lot of cat image issues, looking at other cats on there, thinking they should look differently. There's a lot of really messing up his cat's self-image.
Yeah.
All right, so the question that Derrick wanted me to ask, and something that I've been bringing in, which I think just with the theme of the podcast of do you feel heard, right? And I want everyone to feel heard. That's the cornerstone of the work that I do in this podcast. Is I want our guests to feel heard, but I also want our listeners, I want everyone to feel heard. And so if there's one thing that you would like people to hear, if there's one thing that you could speak to, imagine the whole world is listening, everyone's tuned into our one podcast, this one episode here. What do you want people to know? What do you want people to hear from you that you think people would benefit from hearing or should hear? Or
everyone deserves their own relationship with technology, and awareness of how we interact with different technologies is the key to establish that authentically, in the sense that each individual, if they're able to pay attention to what their relationship is like with work email or video games or TikTok or social media, they kind of have their sort of right to relate to that in whatever way they want to. And for some people, their relationship might look very different from yours. And that doesn't give you the right to shame them, and also to shame and guilt ourselves if your relationship looks different from what the story that people say online is.
Outstanding.
Beautiful.
Jay, thank you so much, man. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all of the wisdom and the openness and conversation. I really enjoyed it. I look forward to our think tank that we're going to develop, and I look forward to episode 2. Truly, man, thank you so much. Derrick, thank you for, doing all of the work to get Jay here. Truly grateful for this episode. And thank you both for your time.
Yeah,
thanks everybody for listening.
Super fun. Thank you.
Yep. Everyone, buy Jay's book. Please reclaim your mind. And actually, as an author, you really should know. I always want to ask this. What's the best way for someone to purchase? I try to order from my local bookstore and go pick it up. What's the best way someone can get this book in their home?
I mean, for me, I always like when people go to local bookstores, because they can access it on their back end, and then a couple of copies show up in some local store, and then sometimes that results in me connecting with the store, which is fun. But if you go to my website, I have links to all of the things. Bookshop.org is an online thing, kind of like Amazon, but it supports local bookstores as well. But then, of course, there's Amazon and Indigo and Barnes & Noble. It's in all those places as well, if convenience matters too sometimes. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Cannot recommend it enough. It is going to be on my shelf for a long time and continually reused as I navigate my relationship with less shame and guilt because of you. Links to find Jay at other places are going to be in the show notes. And if you have questions for next time about, hopefully for that next appearance, send them to contact@helpingtheherd.com or comment on these videos. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks so much, Jay.
Beautiful. Thank you.
This has been the Do You Feel Heard podcast. If you're interested in resources that will help you move through conflict, you can go to doyoufeelheard.com, where we have tools for individuals and couples.